So what I want to show you is how to log into the administrative interface of Gear. You really don't need to log into Gear if you just want to find an item and bookmark it, or if you want to embed an item, you want to get the code to embed an item into a blog post or into something in Blackboard. All of that stuff is publicly available. If you want to get the link to say all the content about a particular topic, you could even pull that link. So there's a lot of things you can do from the public interface without actually having to have that administrative access. But if you do need to have that administrative access, you're just going to go to gear.athenstech.edu and you're going to type admin, and it's going to come up with a login screen. You have a username, password. There can only be one username per email, so you can't have multiples assigned to an email. There is a remember me feature, which is very much like a password keeper kind of thing. If you lose your password, it can be reset. For the CTL login, it is set to that ctl@athenstech.edu email account, so it will go to that. And then of course it tells you which version of Omeka we're using. Some people also call it Omeka. It's sort of, I've heard people call it both. I started calling it Omeka at the beginning. You notice here that this is a dashboard. It looks very much like a lot of content management systems. It actually looks a little bit like the WordPress interface, and I think it actually looks a little bit like Drupal too. But anyway, when you go in and look, you will see that it will tell you right up front if there's a new version. This is both good and bad, because it's good to know that there's a new version that's come out. However, it doesn't tell you what changes have occurred between the versions, and more importantly, there is no indication as to whether or not the plugins will work with that version. It could be that the plugins are compatible with version 2.4. It could be that some of the plugins are compatible and others are not. It could mean that all the plugins, and in all likelihood it probably does mean all of the plugins need to be tested and reviewed before an upgrade actually happens. So as long as there's not a security upgrade, and in this case I know there's not, but as long as there's not a security upgrade, I would not suggest doing any upgrades, because there's no telling what could break in the meantime. So as long as it stays where it is and stays stable and there is no alerts in terms of a security upgrade, I would not pursue that, because it is stable right now. The other things you can see is we have 1,323 items. That's how many items are processed. That's not how many files are in here. Items are the actually metadata records that are in here that have files attached to them. So actually some items, like the yearbooks, have one record and 70 files attached to it. So we'll actually look at one of those in a minute. There's 23 collections. Some of the collections are for processing, and for sort of bucket and workflow organization, there's some of these right here. You can see them. The Elberton Campus Collection is not a public collection. It's just meant to sort of drop things that are related to Elberton into that bucket for organization and for subject analysis. You can see here we have 413 plugins. Those are plugins, 413 tags. Those are all tags that I've assigned, and some of those tags do impact and create those specialized searches, like for photographs and things like that. So it's very important to be aware of the tags that are being used. I will say that the easiest way to find out what tags are being used for a particular thing is to find something that's like what you want to add, and then copy all the tags and put them in. That's probably the easiest way. You're not going to want to do that for subject headings, because of course subject headings have to do with the item itself. But in terms of searching, if you have photographs and you have photographs from a particular year, then you would use photographs contemporary, because those are triggers for our searches, and then you would put it actually into the and then color photographs is our other category for that, and then that will trigger those searches. So it is kind of complex in terms of what's been built. We have 4 user accounts right now, and then the theme is Berlin Revised, because it's based upon the default theme Berlin. But the only thing that has been changed in Berlin is really the public interface. So all the development's gone on the public interface. If you go look at tutorials and other things, and they're looking at the Berlin theme, it will look just like this, except of course the content's different. So if you just go in, let's see, we can go in and actually look at a yearbook. That might be a fun one to do. So if you go in and look at a yearbook, you'll see that there's items, pages, and then if you scroll down further, there's files. So there's actually 4 different kinds of records in Omeka and 4 different kinds of types of content. So an item is that traditional metadata record that a file hangs off of. For those of you who work with cataloging records, that would be like a bib record with a holding record hanging off of it. A simple page is like a website. So each of these simple pages are the individual websites. So essentially Omeka is one large website with a bunch of mini websites built into it, and each of those websites are coded individually. So we'll go look at each one of these in just a second so you can take a look, but I really just want to show you what an item record looks like. So if you look at the item record, this is one where I just pulled one still, or I pulled one image from a yearbook. So this is the yearbook staff, and you see the title, you see a description here, creator, subjects, these are all LCSH, publisher, copyright date. This is very typical library metadata terminology, sort of following typical standards in terms of what would be input there, then format, type, extent, and then for the photographs in terms of what's been scanned or in terms of the yearbooks, I have added information about it being joint project between CTL and Athens Technical College Library. And of course that is following traditional sort of name authority in terms of how you construct those names. Right statements, the library and I worked on the right statements, so that's where those are coming from. And then all of this stuff over here on the side is created in the process of creating a record. So I'll show you a blank work form in a minute, but I wanted to show you what one looks like that's completed before we get started. So for example, if I found a typo in this, I could click on Edit, and it's going to actually bring up the work form. And we're going to look at a blank work form in a minute, but you see here that this is the Dublin core, so there's actually 5 different tabs that have to be edited. Of course, Dublin core is the heart of the metadata, and for the grant material, this is part of what makes the grant material harvestable, because these are mapped to Dublin core metadata standards following Dublin core rules and following rules for description. Then that makes it easier for them to be mapped together. So Dublin core, that's a sort of that full bibliographic information, full metadata information. Item type metadata, this has to do with the actual item type, and really has to do with whether or not something's text or whether or not something's a map and things like that. And I actually did try to give a little bit of information about what you would be looking for. Grant material actually have their very own item type, and that is to help with searching and help with organization, help with indexing, and it's also so that we could capture affiliation for where that material was coming from. So grant material is a completely unique group of material. So if you look here, you'll see that for the item type metadata, still image, which is where our photographs would be, you see here there's information about original format, physical description, photo number. In this case, we don't have a photo number because it's a scanned yearbook, but this would be a place that we would put the photograph number as well as the box number. So you can kind of see where all that is. Files, this is where you can upload files. Generally, there's going to be one file per item. The exception is the yearbooks, and that's a whole kind of, its own category. Creative Commons, that's where we're assigning our licensing for photographs and all other content that's not grant content We're using a NCSA license, which is a non-commercial share-alike license. And so basically you can just check all these little boxes here, and that will generate this very nice little Creative Commons license at the bottom. For grant material is the most generous of all the license, and it is that just CC BY. And that was a decision that was made early on, was that that material would be CC BY. The other one that's important for photographs, and this only works for items that are still images or graphic design materials like ping files and things like that, you need to check the zoom, because if you don't check the zoom, you won't get that very nice zoom feature within the website. And then finally, the very last tab is the tags page. And actually, if you go in and you just start typing, let's see, what do we have here? We have photographs, we have early photographs. Oh, we could add Athens Technical College here. So it should automatically pop up for you. And once you find it, you can just click on it, and then once you add it, you can just save it. Mapping was for Google Maps, and while it does work, everything we have just about is Athens, and so it piles up on top of each other, so it's not particularly useful. I'm going to leave it there for now, but it needs more work, so I would just leave it, just say that. And then we save it, and that's it. It is very easy. You notice the delete button there. It is very, very easy to delete something. So there's not a lot in the way of undo or undelete. So I would say go slowly with whatever you're doing. And that's how you edit something, and that is sort of how you log in and what the interface is. And on that note, I'm going to stop this recording.